And I suggest to you that you bring it in by means of miracles. Feed the people and you'll get a following. Now, Satan was not wrong. Satan was right. And our story today proves that he was right. The thing is that it's not bread the people needed. Jesus could have gotten a following, but it would have been a bread following. And they would have followed him only as long as he fed them. Now, this issue between the superficiality and the reality parallels also what we had a couple of sessions ago in the parable of the 4 kinds of soil. The second soil, you recall, was a soil which was shallow, and they received the word with joy, and then they grew up, sprang up, and then when the persecution came, it wilted. Here again we have people who are glad to follow Jesus as long as he feeds them. And this is going to be the major, it's the high point in the popularity of Jesus. It's the crisis after which he never again reaches this level of popularity at any other time. Our chapter that we're going to use is the one which involves the explanation of the parable, of the miracle, and not just its occurrence. So we will begin in John, we will begin in chapter 6, verse 1, following.
After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a multitude followed him, because they saw the signs which he did on those who were diseased. Jesus went up into the hills, and there sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. And lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a multitude was coming to him,
one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a lad here that has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish." He had said to them, "Go buy some bread and feed these people so they can eat." And Philip had said, why, it would take the wages of a man for over half a year, 200 denarii, to buy enough bread for each of these folks to have a small bit to eat. And when Andrew came up, he found that this lad only had these 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. And Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." It's a very minor item to comment on here, but if you're going to handle a lot of people, organization becomes necessary. If Jesus set up a counter of some kind and said, "Everybody come up and get your bread," with 5,000 people, some people would have been knocked over, stepped on, and so on. No, you can't do it that way. These folks who are against organization are people who are in small groups, where the organization is real, but it's informal. It's not stated. It's based on personality or popularity. Whenever you get any large number of people, organization becomes essential. And Jesus said, have the people sit down. Don't crowd now. Sit down and wait until the bread is brought to you. And so there'll be sufficient aisles. Put 50 or 100 in a group. Now 100, the larger group, would be 10 rows and 10 to a row. Nobody is further than 5 people from the end of the row. This is remarkably like our modern city ordinances, which allow a person only to be in the 7th seat, so that your total length of a row can be 13. And so it's only 6 seats beside your own to an aisle on the way out. And Jesus had approximately the same division. And you put them in groups of 10 by 10, or a smaller group, which would be something like 7 by 7. Sit down in groups of 50 to 100. And then Jesus took the bread and the loaves and began to break, and he gave it to the disciples. There's no mention here of the point at which the multiplication began, whether it occurred in his hands, which I think likely, so that there still, he broke it off and gave it, and there was still some more to break off, and he gave it. But because the emphasis is not upon the mechanics of the miracle, and miracles can't be explained anyway, or there wouldn't be miracles. if you can explain them, it's not a miracle. And so they fed the people, and they ate, and they were filled. And if you are inclined to leave your picnic area with plates all over the ground and things scattered around, may I suggest to you that Jesus had them, in army terms, police the place? They picked up all the scraps. He was one of the earliest people who believed in ecology, and they saved all the scraps and put them into baskets. This is characteristic of him. It's very interesting. We'll come to it sometime later, that when Jesus was raised from the dead, the little detail that convinced the Apostle John when he followed Peter into the tomb was that the grave clothes were not only lying there as the body came out of it, but that Jesus had apparently taken the time to take the wrappings which had been around his head and to fold them. The head napkin was folded in its place. I won't ask the teenagers that I'm talking to right now what your closet looks like at home, or what your dresser drawers look like at home, or some of our men what your garage looks like at home. But Jesus was neat. Jesus picked up after himself. Jesus even folded the head napkin that had been around his head when he was dead before he left the tomb. And this little touch convinced John the apostle that Jesus was really raised from the dead. But back now to our story here. And he fed the people. Now, as we go down into verse 14, read what the people said about it.
When the people saw the sign which he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world."
In other words, it was not the teaching of Jesus. It was food in their stomach. Friends, let me warn you. The Antichrist, who's going to come, and perhaps not far from now, is going to put food into the stomachs of the people. The Bible says of the coming Antichrist that no man will be able to buy or sell without submitting to his economic system. Unless they have his number, they cannot do economic business. You will have to have the number of the Antichrist to even go to the grocery store. You can't buy or sell without it. And he will come to power on filling the stomachs of people who've been unemployed, who've been depressed, who've been hungry. And they will say of him, falsely, but they will say of him that he's the one.
Well, we trust that you've taken your notes and you're now ready to take our TV Bible exam, which is coming right up. Jesus said that his disciples were to enter into a town and 1. Find out who is worthy and stay there. 2. Visit and stay in various homes. 3. Look for the best cooking and stay there. And whatever town or village you enter, find out who is worthy in it and stay with him until you depart.